I tried to disappear 3 times before anyone in my family noticed I was drowning. And when they finally did notice, it wasn't because they were paying attention, it was because strangers forced them to look. My name is Alexa Brennan, and this is the story of how I survived the people who were supposed to save me and how a crisis intervention team did what my own blood refused to do. They made my family face the truth.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
People always ask what drives someone to that edge, like there's supposed to be one catastrophic moment that explains everything. But that's not how it happened for me. It was quieter than that, slower, like drowning in shallow water while everyone around you assumes you're just floating. I grew up in Riverside, a mid-sized town in Oregon where everyone knew everyone's business, or at least they thought they did. Our house sat on Maple Grove Lane, a street lined with oak trees and families who waved at each other from their driveways. From the outside, we looked like we had it together. My dad, Richard Brennan, was a regional manager for a logistics company. My mom, Patricia, worked part-time at the local library and spent her weekends organizing community book drives. My older brother, Marcus, was the golden child, captain of his high school soccer team, honor roll student, already accepted into Oregon State on a partial scholarship. And then there was me, Alexa, 22 years old, community college dropout, working part-time at a coffee shop called The Daily Grind, and living in the converted attic of my parents' house because I couldn't afford to move out. I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I had plans too. I'd wanted to study graphic design, maybe move to Portland, work for one of those creative agencies with exposed brick walls and kombucha on tap. But somewhere between high school graduation and my second semester at Riverside Community College, something inside me just stopped. It felt like everyone else had gotten a manual for adulthood and I'd missed the distribution day. The mornings were the hardest. I'd wake up at 5:30 to open the coffee shop, and for those first few seconds, I wouldn't remember yet. Then it would all come rushing back, the weight in my chest, the exhaustion that sleep never fixed, the feeling that I was watching my life through a foggy window instead of actually living it. My family didn't notice. Or maybe they noticed and didn't know what to do with it, so they chose to believe I was fine. It's easier that way, I think. Easier to assume someone's okay than to ask questions that might lead to uncomfortable answers. Dinner at the Brennan house happened every night at 6:30 sharp. Mom insisted on it, said it was important for families to eat together. We'd sit around the table, the same oak table we'd had since I was 7, and go through the motions of connection. "How was everyone's day?" Mom would ask, serving portions of whatever casserole or roasted chicken she'd prepared. Marcus would launch into stories about soccer practice, about his classes, about his girlfriend Emma and how her parents invited him to their lake house for the weekend. Dad would grunt approvals between bites, occasionally interjecting with advice about time management or networking opportunities. "Alexa," Mom would eventually turn to me, almost as an afterthought. "How was the coffee shop?" "Fine," I'd say. "Same as always." And that would be it. They'd nod, satisfied with the answer, and move on. Nobody asked why I had dropped out. Nobody asked why I stopped hanging out with my friends from high school. Nobody asked why I spent most of my free time in the attic with the door closed. The attic had become my sanctuary and my prison. It wasn't much, just a converted space with slanted ceilings, a twin bed pushed against one wall, a desk I never used, and a small window that looked out over the backyard. But it was mine. When I closed that door, I could pretend I was somewhere else entirely. I started spending more time up there. Entire weekends would pass where I'd only come down for meals, moving through the house like a ghost. I stopped answering texts from my friend Jasmine, who'd been my best friend since middle school. She'd message me about getting coffee or going to the movies, and I'd read them, but couldn't bring myself to respond. What would I even say? That I couldn't find the energy to shower most days, let alone go out and pretend to be a functioning human being? Work was the only thing that forced me into the world. At the Daily Grind, I could hide behind the routine. Take orders, make drinks, smile at customers, repeat. My coworker Dylan would try to make conversation during slow periods, asking about my plans for the weekend or if I'd watched whatever show everyone was talking about. I became an expert at deflection. Probably just gonna relax or haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I've heard it's good. Neutral, forgettable, fine. My manager, Carol, was a kind woman in her 50s who wore colorful scarves and always smelled like vanilla. She'd give me concerned looks sometimes, especially on days when I couldn't quite get the smile right. "You doing okay, honey?" she'd ask. "Yeah, just tired," I'd reply. Always tired. It was the easiest explanation, and people rarely pushed back on it. But the tiredness wasn't normal. It was bone deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that had nothing to do with how much sleep I got. I could sleep 12 hours and wake up feeling like I'd run a marathon. Some days, getting out of bed felt like lifting a mountain. Brushing my teeth became a victory. Putting on clean clothes was an accomplishment worth celebrating, except I had no one to celebrate with. The thoughts started small, just little whispers in the back of my mind during particularly hard days. Everyone would be better off without you. You're just taking up space. What's even the point? I tried to push them away at first, tried to logic my way out of them, but logic doesn't work when your brain chemistry is working against you. The thoughts got louder, more persistent. They'd wake me up at 3 a.m. and keep me company until dawn. I started researching. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd scroll through articles about depression, about suicide prevention, about warning signs. I recognized myself in every description, but recognizing the problem and knowing what to do about it were two different things. I thought about telling someone. I really did. I'd rehearse conversations in my head, practicing different ways to say, "I'm not okay," without sounding dramatic or attention-seeking. But every time I got close, something would stop me.
What if they didn't believe me? What if they thought I was being overdramatic? What if they told me to just try harder, think more positively, count my blessings? I'd read enough stories online to know that's how it went sometimes. People minimized your pain because it made them uncomfortable, because they didn't know how to fix it, because acknowledging it meant admitting they'd missed the signs. So I kept quiet. I went to work, came home, ate dinner with my family, retreated to my attic. I became very good at being invisible. And my family, busy with their own lives and achievements, let me be. Marcus got accepted into a summer internship program. Mom organized a celebration dinner, invited the extended family. Everyone congratulated him, talked about his bright future, his potential. I sat at the end of the table, pushing food around my plate. And nobody noticed that I barely ate anything. Nobody noticed that I barely spoke. Nobody noticed me at all. That's when I realized something that chilled me to my core. I could disappear right now, in the middle of this crowded room full of people who shared my DNA, and it would take them hours to realize I was gone. Maybe days, maybe longer. And that realization, that profound, devastating loneliness while surrounded by family, was more painful than anything I'd ever experienced. Because it meant I was already gone. I'd been gone for months. I was just a body going through the motions, a placeholder at the dinner table, a name on the family tree that nobody really saw anymore. The scary part wasn't the dark thoughts anymore. The scary part was how much sense they were starting to make. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. It happened on a Tuesday in March. Not a special Tuesday, just another gray, unremarkable day that started like all the others. I'd worked the morning shift at the daily grind, came home around 2 in the afternoon, and went straight to my attic room without saying hello to anyone. Mom was in the kitchen preparing something for dinner. I could hear the muffled sounds of chopping and the occasional clatter of pots. Dad wouldn't be home for another few hours. Marcus was at soccer practice. The house felt empty despite not being empty at all. I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. That's what I'd been doing a lot lately, just staring.
Not at my phone, not at a book or a screen, just staring at nothing. My mind cycling through the same thoughts over and over like a broken record. Except this time, something was different. My phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine. The first one in weeks that I hadn't immediately ignored. "Lexi, I'm worried about you. Can we please talk? I miss my best friend." I read it 3 times. Each time the words hit differently. The first read, I felt nothing. The second read, I felt guilty. The third read, I felt angry. She missed her best friend, past tense, as if that person didn't exist anymore. And maybe she was right. Maybe that version of Alexa, the one who used to laugh until her stomach hurt, who stayed up late watching terrible reality TV with Jasmine, who had dreams and plans and energy, maybe she really was gone. I looked around my attic room, really looked at it for the first time in weeks. Dirty clothes piled in the corner, empty water bottles on the nightstand, the curtains drawn shut, blocking out whatever weak sunlight Oregon's spring had to offer. The air was stale. When was the last time I'd opened that window? My desk caught my eye, specifically the drawer where I had been stashing things. Not drugs or anything illegal, just pills. Over-the-counter stuff at first, pain relievers I'd bought a few extra bottles of casually at different stores so no one would notice a pattern. Sleep aids that I'd stockpiled from various purchases. Nothing that would raise red flags individually, but together, in that drawer, they represented something I hadn't wanted to name. Until now. I opened the drawer, counted them, did the math in my head, researched on my phone with clinical detachment like I was studying for a test instead of planning my own exit. The information was all there, readily available to anyone who knew where to look. Forums where people discussed methods with disturbing casualness, articles about toxicity levels, case studies. The scariest part? How calm I felt. No panic, no fear, just a sense of relief that there was a solution to this constant suffocating pain, a way to make it stop. I didn't think about my family. Or rather, I did think about them, but in an abstract way. They'd be sad, sure. There would be a funeral. People would say nice things about me that they never said when I was alive. Marcus would probably feel guilty for a while. Mom would cry. Dad would get quiet and throw himself into work even more than usual. But then life would go on. It always does. They'd move forward, and eventually I'd just be a sad memory they'd bring up occasionally. "Remember Alexa?" they'd say, and someone would nod. And there'd be a moment of silence, and then they'd talk about something else. In my twisted logic, it seemed almost merciful. Better a sharp, acute grief than this slow, invisible suffering that nobody wanted to acknowledge anyway. I started writing. Not a note, not yet. Just thoughts. Fragments of feelings I'd never been able to articulate out loud. I wrote about the loneliness, about feeling like I was screaming underwater while everyone walked by the pool, about the exhaustion of pretending to be okay, about how much energy it took just to exist and how I didn't have that energy anymore. The words poured out of me, filling page after page in a notebook I'd bought months ago for college classes I never finished. It was the most honest I'd been with myself in years. And with that honesty came a strange kind of clarity. I wasn't okay. I hadn't been okay for a long time. And nobody was coming to save me because nobody knew I needed saving. That realization should have devastated me. Instead, it felt like permission. I closed the notebook and stood up, looked at myself in the small mirror hanging on the wall. I looked tired. My hair needed washing. I had dark circles under my eyes that concealer couldn't hide anymore. But my expression was calm, resolved. I would wait until tonight, after dinner, after everyone went to their rooms, after the house settled into its usual nighttime routine where we were all physically close, but emotionally miles apart. Nobody would know until morning, and by then it wouldn't matter. The decision made, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The constant noise in my head quieted, the weight on my chest lifted slightly.
If this was the answer, then at least there was an answer. I went downstairs for dinner at 6:30 like always. Mom had made lasagna, one of my childhood favorites, although I couldn't remember the last time I actually enjoyed eating it. We sat in our usual spots around the oak table. "How was practice, Marcus?" Dad asked, diving into his food. "Good. Coach thinks we have a real shot at regionals this year." Marcus was animated, gesturing with his fork as he talked about plays and strategies I didn't understand. Mom smiled proudly. "That's wonderful, honey. Emma must be so excited." "Yeah, she's coming to all the games. Her parents might even drive down for the big one." The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. I was present, but not participating. Visible, but not seen. "Alexa, you're quiet tonight," Mom said, and for a brief, desperate moment, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe she'd actually ask me. Maybe she'd look at me, really look, and see what I'd been trying to hide. "Just tired," I said, automatically. "You're always tired," Marcus said with a laugh that wasn't quite mean, but wasn't kind either. "Maybe you should actually do something instead of hiding in your room all day." "Marcus," Mom said in that half-hearted, chiding tone that didn't actually mean anything. Dad looked up from his plate. "He's got a point, Alexa. You're young. You should be out with friends, making plans. When I was your age..." I stopped listening. I'd heard this speech before, the one about wasted potential and getting out of your comfort zone and how their generation had it harder, but they managed just fine. It was easier to nod along than to explain that getting out of bed was a triumph, that making it through a shift at work without crying in the bathroom was an accomplishment, that I was fighting a war inside my head every day and losing. "I know, Dad," I said when he paused for breath. "You're right." That satisfied him. He went back to his lasagna. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I helped Mom clear the plates, a task I performed on autopilot. Marcus went upstairs to video chat with Emma. Dad retreated to his office to finish some work emails. Mom settled in the living room with her book club selection. I climbed the stairs to my attic, each step feeling significant. This was it. The last time I'd climb these stairs. The last time I'd hear the creak on the 5th step that had been there since we moved in. The last time I'd turn the handle on my door and enter this space that had become both refuge and prison. I sat on my bed and opened the drawer, lined up the bottles in a row, filled a glass of water from the bathroom down the hall, came back and locked my door, something I rarely did, but tonight it seemed important.
My phone buzzed again. "Jasmine. Please, Lexi, just let me know you're okay." I typed out a response, deleted it, typed another one, deleted that too. Finally, I wrote, "I'm sorry." Sent it before I could overthink it. Her response came immediately. "Sorry for what? Lexi, what's going on?" I turned my phone face down, picked up the first bottle. And then I heard it. A car door slamming, voices outside. Not just any voices, urgent voices. Then footsteps on the porch, fast and heavy. The doorbell ringing insistently. I froze, bottle still in my hand. Mom's voice from downstairs, confused. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Brennan, I'm Officer Sarah Chen with the Riverside Police Department. We received a concerning message that originated from this address. We need to speak with Alexa Brennan immediately." My heart stopped. Jasmine, she'd called the police. She'd actually called the police. "I don't understand," Mom was saying, her voice rising with each word. "What kind of message? Alexa's fine. She's just upstairs." "Ma'am, we need to see her right now." Footsteps on the stairs, multiple pairs. My dad's voice joining the confusion. "What's going on? What's happening?" A knock on my door. Firm, professional, terrifying. "Alexa, this is Officer Chen. I need you to open the door, please." I looked at the bottles lined up on my bed, at the glass of water, at the locked door between me and whatever was about to happen next. Everything I'd planned, the peace I'd found in making this decision, shattered in an instant. "Alexa, if you don't open this door, we're going to have to break it down. I need to know you're safe." My hands were shaking as I swept the bottles back into the drawer, closed it, kicked it shut with my foot, stood up, unlocked the door, opened it. Officer Chen stood there in full uniform, her expression serious but not unkind. Behind her, my parents, both looking confused and frightened in equal measure. Another officer, male, standing slightly behind Chen. "Are you Alexa Brennan?" she asked, though she clearly already knew. "Yes," I whispered. "Can we come in?" I nodded, stepping back. They entered my small attic room, this private space that had been mine alone, and suddenly it was full of people and uniforms and questions I wasn't prepared to answer. Officer Chen's eyes swept the room, taking in the closed curtains, the mess, the general sense of neglect and despair that I'd been living in for months. Her gaze landed on my phone, still face down on the bed, then back to me. "Your friend Jasmine called 911. She was worried about a message you sent her. She thought you might be in danger." Behind her, I heard my mother gasp. "Danger? What is she talking about?" For the first time in months, my family was actually looking at me, really looking. And now that they were, I realized I had no idea what to say.
The silence in my attic room was suffocating. Officer Chen stood there waiting for an answer I didn't know how to give. My parents hovered in the doorway, their faces showing a mixture of confusion and dawning horror that made my stomach twist. "I'm fine," I finally managed, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Jasmine overreacted. I just meant I was sorry for not responding to her texts lately. Officer Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes told me she'd heard this exact explanation 1,000 times before. She glanced at her partner, Officer Martinez, who gave a subtle nod. "Alexa, I need you to be honest with me," Chen said, her voice calm but firm. "Are you having thoughts of hurting yourself?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. I could feel my parents' stares burning into the side of my face. This was the moment. I could keep lying, keep pretending, keep playing the role of fine that I'd perfected over months of isolation. Or I could tell the truth and watch everything crumble. "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "I'm just going through a rough patch. College didn't work out, and I'm figuring things out, that's all." "Alexa Marie Brennan," my mother's voice cut through, sharp with panic she was trying to mask as anger. "What is going on? Why would Jasmine call the police?" "Mrs. Brennan," Officer Chen interjected, "I'm going to need to speak with Alexa privately for a few minutes. Can you and your husband please wait downstairs?" "Absolutely not," Dad said, his voice tight. "This is our house and she's our daughter. We have a right to know—" "Sir, with respect, if your daughter is in crisis, the best thing you can do right now is give us space to assess the situation. We'll brief you shortly." The word crisis seemed to hit my father like a physical blow. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at my mother. Mom's hand was pressed against her mouth, her eyes already wet with tears she was fighting to hold back. "Please," Officer Chen said, gentler this time. "We'll be down in just a few minutes." They left, but I could hear them on the stairs, their whispered argument floating up through the floorboards. Marcus's door opened. He'd obviously heard everything, and I heard his voice join the confused interrogation happening below. Officer Chen gestured to my bed. "Can we sit?" I sat on the edge, and she settled beside me while Officer Martinez remained standing near the door, giving us space but staying alert. "Alexa, I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm here because someone who cares about you was worried enough to call for help. That takes courage on her part, and usually, when someone does that, there's a good reason. So, I'm going to ask you again, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you thinking about suicide?" The word felt obscene spoken out loud in my small room. Suicide. Not hurting yourself, or doing something, or any of the soft euphemisms people use to make it more palatable. She said it directly, clearly, and it forced me to confront what I'd been dancing around for weeks. "Sometimes," I whispered. "But I wasn't going to do anything tonight, I swear." It was technically true. I hadn't started yet.
The bottles were still in the drawer. Can you tell me about those sometimes? When do you have these thoughts? I don't know. A lot. Most of the time, maybe. But everyone has bad thoughts sometimes, right? It doesn't mean anything. It means something when those thoughts start feeling like solutions instead of intrusions. Have you told anyone about feeling this way? A doctor, a counselor, your parents? I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. My parents don't even notice I exist unless I'm sitting at the dinner table. Why would I tell them I want to die? They seem pretty concerned now. Now that the police are here, sure. Now that it's embarrassing, now that the neighbors probably saw the squad car pull up, I could feel anger bubbling up, hot and unexpected. Where had this been hiding? But last week, last month, 6 months ago when I dropped out of college and they just nodded like it was fine, they didn't care then. Officer Martinez spoke for the first time. Sometimes families don't know how to recognize the signs. That doesn't mean they don't care. It means they weren't looking, I shot back. My brother gets celebrated for every minor achievement, but I can barely get out of bed and nobody asks why. That's not missing signs. That's choosing not to see them. Chen let me sit with my anger for a moment before continuing. Alexa, based on what you've told me and the concern raised by your friend, I believe you need immediate mental health support. I can call a mobile crisis team to come here and do a full assessment, or we can transport you to Riverside General, where they have psychiatric services. The word psychiatric sent ice through my veins. You mean like a mental hospital? A psychiatric emergency department. They would evaluate you, determine if you're safe, and recommend next steps. It's not scary, I promise. They're there to help. I don't need help. I told you I'm fine. I wasn't going to do anything. The lies came easier now. Desperate and fireball. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Please, just tell Jasmine I'm okay and everyone can leave. My parents are freaking out for no reason. I can't do that, Chen said simply. Once we've been called for a welfare check where someone expresses suicidal ideation, we have a responsibility to ensure they're safe. I'm going to call the crisis team. Panic flooded through me. This was spiraling out of control. What had been private, what had been mine to manage or not manage, was suddenly public and official and terrifying. Please don't. You don't understand. This will make everything worse. My family will never let me live this down. They'll treat me like I'm broken, like I'm some fragile thing that needs to be watched constantly. I can't do that. What you can't do is continue the way you've been going, Chen said firmly. Alexa, I've been doing this job for 8 years. I've responded to calls like this more times than I can count. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that you need support right now. Professional support, not just good intentions from people who don't know how to help. Officer Martinez stepped forward. I'm going to go brief your parents and call the crisis team. We'll have them here within the hour. He left, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I could hear the explosion of questions from below, my mother's voice rising in distress, my father demanding answers, Marcus unusually silent. Chen stayed with me. I know this feels overwhelming right now, like everything is spinning out of control, but I promise you, this is the beginning of getting real help, not the end of your world. You don't know that, I said, tears finally breaking through. You don't know what it's like in this family. They're going to blame me for causing a scene, for embarrassing them, for not being strong enough to just handle things on my own. Then that's on them, not you. Mental illness isn't a character flaw or a choice. It's a medical condition that needs treatment, just like diabetes or a broken bone. Would they blame you for having pneumonia? They'd blame me for not taking better care of myself so I didn't get pneumonia in the first place. I wiped at my face angrily. You don't get it. In my family, weakness isn't tolerated. You push through, you deal with it, you don't fall apart and need the police to come save you. Is that what you think is happening? That you're weak? Chen leaned forward slightly. Alexa, you've been fighting a war inside your head for months, maybe longer. You've gotten up every day, gotten to work, functioned despite feeling like you're drowning. That's not weakness, that's incredible strength. But even strong people need help sometimes. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe that this wasn't all my fault, that I wasn't just defective or dramatic or attention-seeking. But years of family dynamics don't disappear because one kind police officer says nice things. What happens now? I asked quietly. The crisis team will arrive. They're mental health professionals, usually a counselor and a psychiatric nurse. They'll talk with you, assess your safety, and talk with your parents. Based on that assessment, they'll make recommendations. That might be outpatient therapy, intensive outpatient programs, or in some cases, a brief inpatient stay for stabilization. And if I refuse? Chen's expression grew more serious. If they determine you're an immediate danger to yourself, they can petition for an involuntary hold. But that's a last resort. Most people choose to accept help voluntarily once they understand their options. The words involuntary hold sent another wave of panic through me. I pictured being restrained, locked up, my autonomy completely stripped away. But another part of me, a small, quiet part I'd been trying to silence for months, felt something else. Relief. Because maybe if someone else made the decision, if someone else took control for a while, I could stop fighting so hard. I could stop pretending. I could stop carrying this weight alone. My parents are going to hate me, I whispered. No, Chen said with surprising conviction. They're going to be scared and confused and probably angry at themselves for not seeing this sooner. But hate? No. I saw their faces, Alexa. Those are parents who just realized their child is in serious pain. Give them a chance to show up for you. I wanted to laugh at her optimism, but I was too tired, too wrung out. The adrenaline that had been keeping me upright was fading, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. Downstairs, I heard new voices. The crisis team had arrived. The crisis team consisted of two people who looked nothing like what I'd expected. Dr. Lisa Hammond was a black woman in her 40s with warm brown eyes and braided hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore jeans and a purple cardigan, not a clinical white coat. Her partner, James Kowalski, was a psychiatric nurse who looked young enough to be fresh out of college, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a calm demeanor that immediately put me slightly at ease. They entered my attic room after a brief conversation with Officer Chen downstairs. I'd heard the murmur of voices, my mother's occasional interjection, but couldn't make out the specifics. Now they were here, and the reality of the situation pressed down on me with suffocating weight. "Hi, Alexa," Dr. Hammond said, settling into the desk chair while James leaned against the wall near the window. "I'm Dr. Hammond, and this is James. We're from the Riverside County Mobile Crisis Response Team. We're here to talk with you and figure out the best way to support you right now. Is that okay?" I nodded, unable to find words. Officer Chen had left after introducing them, her job apparently complete once the mental health professionals arrived. "I know this probably feels invasive and overwhelming," Dr. Hammond continued. "Your private space has been invaded by a bunch of strangers, and you're probably feeling a mix of emotions right now. That's completely understandable. We're not here to judge you or force anything on you. We're here to listen and help. Can you tell me what's been going on?" Where did I even start? The question was so broad, so impossible to answer in a way that would make sense. How do you explain that you've been slowly disappearing for months and nobody noticed until a friend panicked over a 2-word text message? "I've been struggling," I said, finally. The understatement of the century. "With depression, I think, for a while now." "How long is a while?" James asked gently. "Maybe a year? It's hard to pinpoint exactly when it started. It was gradual. I picked at a thread on my bedspread, unable to meet their eyes. At first, I just thought I was tired or stressed about school, but it got worse." "Have you ever received treatment for depression before? Therapy or medication?"
Dr. Hammond's pen hovered over her clipboard, but she wasn't writing yet, just listening. No, I've never talked to anyone about it. Not professionally. What about friends or family? I laughed bitterly. My family doesn't really do feelings. And my friends, I push them away. It's easier to be alone than to pretend everything's fine. Dr. Hammond nodded, no judgment in her expression. Officer Chen mentioned you've been having thoughts of suicide. Can you tell me about that? There it was again, that word. Somehow it was easier to hear the second time. Like my brain was slowly accepting that this was real, that we were actually talking about it. Yeah, I admitted quietly. For a few months now. At first they were just passing thoughts, like, what if I wasn't here anymore? But lately they've been more persistent, more detailed. Have you made any plans? James asked. My eyes flickered involuntarily to the desk drawer. Dr. Hammond caught the movement. Alexa, we need you to be completely honest with us right now. Your safety is our priority. Have you collected anything that you were planning to use to harm yourself? The moment of truth. I could keep lying, but what was the point? They'd probably search my room anyway if I didn't cooperate, and some exhausted part of me was tired of carrying secrets. There are pills, I whispered. In that drawer. Over-the-counter stuff. I've been collecting them. James moved to the drawer, opened it carefully, and pulled out the bottles. He counted them silently while Dr. Hammond watched me with an expression that was sad, but not surprised. Were you planning to use these tonight? She asked. I don't know, maybe. I was thinking about it when Officer Chen showed up. But I hadn't done anything yet. I was just considering my options. What stopped you from acting on those thoughts before tonight? I thought about that. What had stopped me during all those other dark nights when the thoughts were just as loud, just as persistent? Fear, mostly. Fear that it wouldn't work and I'd end up worse off. Fear of what people would say. Fear of hurting the few people who might actually care, like Jasmine. I paused. And I guess some small part of me hoped things might get better. That hope's been getting quieter, though. That small part is still there, though, Alexa. That matters. Even if it's just a whisper right now, it's there. Can I ask, what would happen if things did get better? What would that look like for you? The question caught me off guard. Nobody had asked me what I wanted, what better might mean. They'd only focused on what was wrong. I don't know, I said slowly. I guess I'd want to feel like myself again, to have energy to do things, to care about things, to not wake up every morning wishing I hadn't. I felt tears building again. I used to have plans, you know. I wanted to be a graphic designer. I wanted to move to Portland, get a studio apartment, work at some creative agency. That all feels impossible now.
Depression has a way of making everything feel impossible, James said. It's like trying to see the horizon through fog. The horizon is still there, but your brain tells you it doesn't exist. So what do I do? The question came out desperate, raw, because I can't keep living like this. I can't keep waking up feeling like this, going through motions, pretending I'm okay when I'm not. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of fighting my own brain every single day. That's why we're here, Dr. Hammond said firmly. You shouldn't have to fight this alone. Depression is a medical condition that requires treatment, just like any other illness. What you need right now is intensive support, therapy, possibly medication, and most importantly, a safety plan. What does that mean, intensive support? There are a few options we need to discuss with you and your parents. Given the severity of your symptoms and the fact that you were actively considering suicide tonight, I'm recommending inpatient psychiatric care for stabilization. My stomach dropped. You mean a psychiatric hospital? A residential treatment facility, yes. Typically for 5 to 7 days, sometimes longer. It's a safe environment where you can be monitored, start treatment, and develop coping skills without the stressors of daily life. No, the word came out sharp, panicked. I can't do that. I have work, I have responsibilities, my family. Your family will manage, Dr. Hammond interrupted gently but firmly, and your work will still be there.
Alexa, you can't pour from an empty cup. Right now, you need to prioritize your mental health and your safety. Everything else is secondary. You don't understand what this will do to them, the embarrassment, the shame. They'll never look at me the same way. Then we'll work with them too, James said. Part of our job tonight is to educate your family about what you're experiencing and how they can support you. This isn't your burden to carry alone anymore. I wanted to argue, to find some way out of this, but beneath the fear and resistance, something else was emerging. That small part Dr. Hammond had mentioned, the part that still hoped, was getting louder. It was terrified, but it was also relieved. What if I said yes? What if I stopped fighting everyone who was trying to help? What if I admitted that I couldn't do this alone and actually accepted support? I need to talk to my parents, I said quietly. They should be part of this decision. Dr. Hammond smiled slightly. That's very mature of you. We absolutely want them involved. In fact, we need to speak with them regardless. Can we bring them up here, or would you prefer to go downstairs? Downstairs, I decided. Neutral territory felt safer somehow, and I needed to get out of this room that had witnessed so much of my pain. We descended the stairs together, James carrying the bottles of pills that represented my darkest contingency plan. My legs felt shaky, like they might give out at any moment. The living room came into view. My parents sat on the couch, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen them. Marcus stood near the window, his arms crossed, his usual confidence replaced with uncertainty. They all looked up as I entered. Mom's eyes were red and swollen. Dad's jaw was clenched tight, his hands clasped together so hard his knuckles were white. Marcus just stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe none of them had. Alexa, Mom breathed, standing up like she wanted to rush toward me but wasn't sure if she should. Dr. Hammond gestured for everyone to sit. Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, Marcus, thank you for your patience. Alexa and I have had a good conversation, and we need to discuss some serious concerns and the next steps for her care. I sat in the armchair across from my parents, suddenly feeling like I was on trial. This was it. The moment everything changed, whether I was ready or not. Alexa has been experiencing severe depression and suicidal ideation. She had collected pills with the intent to potentially harm herself. Based on my assessment, she needs immediate psychiatric care. Mom made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Dad's face went pale. Marcus sank into the nearest chair. I'm recommending voluntary admission to Riverside Behavioral Health Center for inpatient treatment, Dr. Hammond continued. This would give Alexa a safe environment to begin healing with professional support. A mental hospital? Dad said. That seems extreme. Mr. Brennan, your daughter was actively planning suicide tonight. A friend's intervention potentially saved her life. This is absolutely appropriate care for the severity of her condition. The room fell silent except for my mother's quiet crying. I looked at my family, really looked at them, and saw fear, confusion, and something that might have been guilt. I wanted to go, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I need help, real help, and I can't do this here. It was the truest thing I'd said in months, and saying it out loud felt like the first real breath I'd taken in a very long time.
The intake process at Riverside Behavioral Health Center happened in a blur of paperwork, questions, and fluorescent lighting. Mom rode with me in the crisis team's van while Dad and Marcus followed in their car. Nobody spoke much during the 20-minute drive. Mom kept reaching for my hand and then pulling back, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to touch me anymore. The facility didn't look like the horror movie version of a psychiatric hospital I'd imagined. It was a low, modern building with large windows and a garden courtyard visible from the entrance. Still, walking through those doors felt like crossing into another world, one I wasn't sure I'd ever really leave, even if my body eventually did. A nurse named Patricia checked me in with practiced efficiency but genuine warmth. She went through my bag, removing anything potentially dangerous, my phone charger cord, the drawstring from my hoodie, even my shoelaces. The systematic removal of anything I could use to hurt myself was both sobering and strangely comforting. They were taking this seriously. They were keeping me safe, even from myself.
Your family can stay for about 30 minutes, Patricia explained. Then we'll get you settled in your room and start the evaluation process. Tomorrow, you'll meet with your treatment team and begin programming. Programming? Like I was a computer that needed to be rebooted. We sat in a small family room with cheerful yellow walls that felt aggressively optimistic. Dad paced near the window. Marcus sat rigidly in a chair, still looking shell-shocked. Mom stayed close to me, her eyes red-rimmed and uncertain. When can we visit? Mom asked Patricia. Visiting hours are daily from 2 to 4 p.m. and 6 to 8 p.m. We encourage family involvement. It's an important part of treatment. Patricia handed Mom a folder. This has information about our programs, what to expect, and resources for families. After Patricia left, the silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Dad stopped pacing and looked at me directly. Why didn't you tell us? His voice cracked on the last word. Why didn't you say something? I tried, I said quietly, just not with words. I dropped out of college, I stopped seeing friends, I barely left my room. I was screaming without making a sound, and nobody heard me. That's not fair, Marcus said suddenly. You can't blame us for not reading your mind. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just telling you what happened. I felt surprisingly calm, like some weight had already lifted just by being here, by having the decision made. Mom made a wounded sound. Alexa, of course we care. You're our daughter. We love you. I know you love me, but love and attention aren't the same thing. I looked at each of them. When was the last time any of you asked me how I was really doing? Not just how was work at dinner, but actually checked in with me. The silence was answer enough. We failed you, Dad said finally, his voice thick. I failed you. I was so focused on work, on Marcus's achievements, on maintaining this picture of a successful family, that I didn't see my own daughter falling apart. It was the most vulnerable I'd ever heard my father sound. We're going to do better, Mom said firmly, grabbing my hand. We're going to learn how to help you. We'll do the family sessions, read the materials, whatever it takes. You're not alone in this anymore. I wanted to believe her. Part of me did. But another part remained skeptical. Years of feeling invisible don't disappear because of one emotional conversation. Patricia returned to take them out. Mom hugged me tightly, whispering apologies I wasn't ready to fully accept yet. Dad squeezed my shoulder, unable to find more words. Marcus hung back, then awkwardly stepped forward. I'm sorry I said that stuff at dinner, about you always being tired and needing to do something. That was really shitty timing. You didn't know. I should have paid more attention. He looked genuinely upset. You're my sister. After they left, Patricia led me down a hallway with abstract art on the walls, probably chosen to be calming and inoffensive. My room was small but clean, with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the courtyard. A roommate situation, Patricia explained, though the other bed was currently empty. Lights out is at 10 p.m., wake up is at 7, breakfast is at 7:30, then you'll have group therapy, individual sessions, and various activities throughout the day. The schedule will make sense once you get into the rhythm. Rhythm. As if my life hadn't just completely derailed. That first night was surreal. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to unfamiliar sounds, distant voices, footsteps in the hallway, someone crying in another room. I wasn't allowed to have my phone, which meant no mindless scrolling to numb my thoughts. Just me and my brain in a strange room and a psychiatric facility. But strangely, I slept better than I had in months. Morning came with a gentle knock from a different nurse doing rounds. The routine began immediately. Vitals check, medication evaluation, breakfast, and a communal dining area with about 15 other patients, ranging from teenagers to elderly adults. Everyone looked normal. That was the thing that struck me most. We all just looked like regular people having breakfast, not crazy people in a mental hospital.
My first group therapy session was led by a counselor named Mike, a man in his 30s with an easy smile and the kind of presence that made you feel heard. 8 of us sat in a circle in a room with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. We're going to check in, Mike said. Name, how you're feeling today, and one thing you're hoping to get out of your time here. Who wants to start? A woman in her 40s named Denise went first, talking about her bipolar disorder and recent manic episode. Then a teenage boy named Tyler who'd attempted suicide after being outed at school. Then others, each with their own story of pain and survival.
When it was my turn, I said, "I'm Alexa. I've been depressed for about a year, and I almost killed myself 2 days ago. I'm hoping to figure out how to want to live again." Saying it out loud to strangers was easier than I expected, maybe because they got it in a way my family never could. They'd been in this darkness too. "Welcome, Alexa," Mike said warmly. "You're in the right place." The days began to blur together, but in a productive way. Individual therapy sessions with Dr. Patel, a psychiatrist who asked probing questions and actually listened to the answers. Group sessions exploring coping mechanisms, cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, mindfulness practices. Art therapy, where I drew my depression as a heavy black cloud with tentacles reaching into every part of my life. The simple act of externalizing it felt powerful. Dr. Patel started me on an antidepressant, explaining it would take a few weeks to feel the full effects, but that it could help rebalance the brain chemistry that had been working against me. The idea that my suffering had a biological component, not just an emotional one, was oddly relieving. It wasn't all in my head, or rather it was, but in a medical way I couldn't just think my way out of. My family came to visit that first evening. They brought books, magazines, my favorite snacks. They were trying, in their awkward way. Mom had already read half the information packet and started researching depression support groups. Dad asked careful questions about my treatment plan. Marcus told me about his soccer game, then caught himself and asked about my day instead. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. On day 3, I attended my first family therapy session. We sat in a conference room, me, my parents, Marcus, and Dr. Ribera, a family therapist. It was uncomfortable and necessary in equal measure. Dr. Ribera didn't pull punches. "Alexa has expressed feeling invisible in her family for quite some time. Can you help me understand the family dynamics?" What followed was 2 hours of the most honest conversation we'd ever had. I talked about feeling overshadowed by Marcus's achievements, about the unspoken pressure to have everything figured out, about the loneliness of being physically present but emotionally isolated. My parents talked about their own childhoods, their belief that pushing through hardship was how you showed strength, and their complete lack of understanding about mental illness. Marcus admitted he'd been so focused on his own life that he'd treated me like background furniture. He said, "I didn't think you needed attention. You always seemed fine. Quiet, but fine." That's the thing about depression, Dr. Ribera explained. It often hides behind a mask of fine. People who are suffering learn to perform normalcy because they don't want to burden others or because they've tried reaching out and been dismissed. Dad's face crumpled. "I dismissed you. All those times you said you were tired, I told you to do more, be more. I thought I was motivating you." "You were telling me I wasn't enough," I said, not to hurt him, but because it was true. That who I was and what I was doing wasn't acceptable. It hurt to say. It hurt them to hear. But Dr. Ribera nodded approvingly. This is the work. Honest communication, even when it's painful. By day 5, something had shifted. Not fixed. I wasn't miraculously cured, but shifted. I had tools now. When the dark thoughts came, I had techniques to challenge them. When I felt overwhelmed, I had breathing exercises that actually helped. When I felt alone, I had a list of people I could call, including a crisis hotline number saved in my phone. More importantly, I had hope. Real hope. Not just the whisper I'd been clinging to before. Hope that came from understanding my illness, from seeing other people in various stages of recovery, from realizing I wasn't uniquely broken. I was sick, and sick people can get better with proper treatment. "You've made remarkable progress," Dr. Patel told me during our session on day 6. "I'm confident about your discharge plan. Outpatient therapy twice a week, medication management, and continued family therapy sessions. I'm ready. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it."
Coming home after 7 days felt like stepping onto a different planet. Everything looked the same, the oak trees lining Maple Grove Lane, our beige house with the blue shutters, the family photos on the living room wall. But I was different, or at least I thought I was. The treatment center had been a bubble, a controlled environment where everyone understood mental illness and recovery was the singular focus. Out here, in the real world, life moved on whether you were ready or not. My first morning back, I woke up in my attic room and felt the familiar weight beginning to settle on my chest. The thought came immediately. Maybe it didn't work. Maybe I'm not actually better. I forced myself out of bed, remembering what Dr. Patel had said. Recovery isn't linear. You'll have good days and hard days. The difference now is you have tools to navigate the hard days. Downstairs, Mom had made pancakes, my childhood favorite. She smiled nervously when I entered the kitchen, clearly trying too hard. Dad looked up from his newspaper with an expression I'd never seen before. Careful attention. "How'd you sleep?" he asked. Okay, which was mostly true. Better than before, at least. Marcus appeared, grabbing a pancake. "Hey, welcome back." Awkward, but genuine. We ate breakfast together, and the silence that had always felt suffocating now just felt quiet. Not comfortable yet, but not unbearable either. My first outpatient therapy appointment was scheduled for that afternoon with a therapist named Dr. Christine Wallace. Her office was in a converted house downtown, warm and cluttered with books and plants. She was a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and an immediate, reassuring presence. "Tell me about your first day back," she said, after introductions. "Strange," I admitted, like I'm waiting for something to go wrong. "That's completely normal. You've just made a huge change and your brain is still adjusting. What does your support system look like right now?" I told her about my family's renewed efforts, the scheduled family therapy sessions, the check-ins that felt forced but well-intentioned. I told her about Jasmine, who'd texted every day I was in treatment and wanted to meet for coffee soon. "And work?" Dr. Wallace asked. Work. I'd been on medical leave, but I was supposed to return to the daily grind next week. The thought filled me with dread. "I don't know if I can go back there," I said quietly. "Facing people, pretending everything is normal, answering questions about where I've been. What would you need to feel safe returning to work?" That question stumped me. What would I need? Understanding, privacy, a guarantee that nobody would treat me differently? I don't think I can get what I need there, I realized aloud. Maybe it's time to find something else. Dr. Wallace nodded. Employment changes can be part of recovery. Sometimes we need to shed aspects of our old life to build a healthier new one. The thought was terrifying and liberating at once. But the real challenges started in week 2. The medication Dr. Patel prescribed was supposed to help, but the side effects hit hard. Nausea, headaches, a weird jittery feeling that made my skin crawl. Dr. Wallace assured me it was temporary, that my body needed time to adjust, but it felt like a cosmic joke. I'd finally committed to getting better, and now I felt physically worse. "I can't do this," I told my mom one morning, hunched over the toilet after another wave of nausea. "The medication is making everything worse." "Dr. Wallace said it would get better in a few weeks," Mom said, rubbing my back. "You just have to push through." Push through. The phrase that had haunted my childhood. I knew she meant well, but it still landed wrong. I called Dr. Patel, who adjusted my dosage and assured me we'd find the right balance. Medication management is a process. Don't give up yet. But I was tired of processes, tired of waiting for things to get better. The progress I'd felt at the treatment center was slipping away, and the old thoughts were creeping back in. "See? Nothing helps. You're unfixable. You should have just..." I stopped that thought. Used the cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. Challenged the negative thinking. But it was exhausting, like fighting a daily battle with my own brain that nobody else could see. Week 3 brought a different kind of crisis. I met Jasmine for coffee at a place across town where nobody from our high school would recognize us. She hugged me tight when she arrived, and I could feel her trembling. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately. "I know calling the police probably felt like a betrayal, but I didn't know what else to do. That text scared me so much, Lexi." "You saved my life," I said, meaning it. "If you hadn't called, I wouldn't be here." We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything. The depression, the treatment center, the medication struggles, the fragile hope I was clinging to. She listened without judgment, occasionally squeezing my hand across the table. "I wish I'd known sooner," she said. "I noticed you pulling away, but I thought you just needed space. I should have pushed harder. This isn't your fault. None of this is anyone's fault." I was starting to believe that myself. But then she said something that shattered my tentative stability.
People are talking at school about where you were. Ryan posted something on Instagram about mental health awareness and tagged you. A bunch of people from our class are asking questions. My stomach dropped. Ryan had been a friend, sort of, but we hadn't talked in months. The idea of him posting about me using my crisis for social media engagement made me feel exposed and violated. I checked Instagram for the first time since before my hospitalization. There it was, a post about checking on your friends, and you never know what someone's going through, with my name tagged. Dozens of comments from people I barely knew expressing concern or sharing their own mental health stories. Some meant well, others felt performative. All of it made me want to disappear again. Everyone knows, I said to Dr. Wallace at our next session. My worst fear came true. I'm not just the girl who couldn't handle college. Now I'm the girl who had a mental breakdown and got hospitalized. That's my identity now. Is that what you believe, or what you're afraid others believe? Dr. Wallace asked. Does it matter? Either way, I can't escape it. She leaned forward. Alexa, you get to decide what your story means. Yes, this happened, but it doesn't have to define you unless you let it. Some people will be ignorant or insensitive, but many will surprise you with their understanding and support. I wanted to believe her, but shame was a heavy blanket I couldn't shake off. The family therapy sessions, which had felt productive at the treatment center, became minefields at home. Old patterns resurfaced. Dad would say something about getting back on track, and I'd hear it as pressure to be fixed already. Mom would hover anxiously, asking how I felt every hour, and I'd feel suffocated. Marcus tried to be supportive, but didn't know how, so he'd make jokes that landed wrong. One dinner erupted into a fight when Dad suggested I consider re-enrolling at community college for fall semester. I can't think about that right now, I snapped. I'm just trying to get through each day. But you need goals, something to work toward. You can't just float indefinitely. I almost died 3 weeks ago. Is it really so terrible that I'm not planning my academic future right now? Mom started crying. Marcus excused himself. Dad's face went red with frustration and fear he didn't know how to express. I retreated to my attic room, slamming the door, an old habit that felt both regressive and necessary. Alone again. Always alone, even surrounded by family trying their best. That night, the dark thoughts came back with a vengeance. Not the same as before. I wasn't planning anything, but the exhaustion of fighting, of trying, of constantly having to advocate for my own mental health was crushing. I texted Dr. Wallace something she'd said I could do in emergencies. I'm struggling, not in danger, but really struggling. She called within 10 minutes. We talked for 45 minutes, her voice calm and steady, reminding me that setbacks were part of recovery, that what I was feeling was normal and temporary. You're in the hardest part, she said. Post-treatment, when the initial support fades and you're expected to function in a world that isn't set up for mental health recovery. It gets easier, I promise. But right now, it's okay to just survive. Just survive. For now, maybe that was enough. The next morning, I apologized to my family. We talked more calmly, and Dad admitted he was pushing because he was scared. Scared of not knowing how to help. Scared of failing me again. Scared of watching me suffer. I need you to trust that I'm doing the best I can, even when that doesn't look like what you think it should, I told them. We're learning. We're all learning, Mom said. It wasn't perfect. We were all stumbling through this together, but at least we were trying. That had to count for something. 3 months after my hospitalization, something unexpected happened. Not a dramatic moment or sudden epiphany, but a quiet realization that arrived on an ordinary Wednesday morning. I was making coffee in the kitchen, actually making it, not just going through mechanical motions, when I noticed I was humming. Just a few notes of a song I'd heard on the radio, nothing significant. But I stopped mid-hum and realized I felt okay. Not perfect, not healed, not cured, just okay. And okay was something I hadn't felt in over a year. The medication had finally stabilized. The side effects had faded. My brain chemistry was finding its balance. But more than that, the work I'd been doing, the therapy, the family sessions, the daily practice of managing my mental health was actually making a difference. Dr. Wallace had warned me about this moment. "You'll be waiting for recovery to announce itself with trumpets," she'd said, "but it usually sneaks up on you. One day you'll realize you're having more good hours than bad ones, then more good days than bad ones. That's when you know the work is paying off." She was right. I'd been so focused on the struggle that I hadn't noticed the gradual shift. That afternoon, I did something I'd been avoiding for weeks. I opened my laptop and looked at graphic design programs. Not to enroll, not to commit to anything, just to look. The interest that had felt dead for so long flickered to life. Faint, but present. I spent 2 hours browsing online courses, watching tutorial videos, exploring what a career in design might actually look like. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like possibility. At dinner that night, family dinners were still happening, but they'd evolved into something more authentic. I mentioned it casually. "I've been looking into graphic design courses, online ones, so I can go at my own pace." Mom's face lit up, but she caught herself before gushing too enthusiastically. "Progress. That sounds wonderful, honey. What kind of programs are you looking at?" We had an actual conversation about it. Dad asked thoughtful questions about career paths and didn't once mention traditional college. Marcus showed me some designs from his girlfriend's Instagram that he thought were cool. It was normal. Beautifully, perfectly normal. But the real transformation happened a week later, during a family therapy session with Dr. Rivera. We'd been meeting monthly, working through communication patterns and addressing the damage that years of emotional distance had caused. "I want to talk about accountability," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Not blame, but accountability. Dr. Rivera nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead." I looked at my parents. When I was in crisis, when I was planning to kill myself, you didn't see it. And I understand that part of that was me hiding it, but part of it was you not looking. I need you to acknowledge that. The room went quiet. This was territory we'd danced around but never directly confronted. Dad cleared his throat. "You're right. We didn't look. We didn't want to see anything wrong because it was easier to believe everything was fine. I was so focused on Marcus's achievements, it felt safer to celebrate what was working than to examine what wasn't. I failed you as a mother by choosing comfort over awareness." Marcus spoke up, surprising all of us. "I was selfish. I liked being the center of attention and didn't want to share space with someone else's problems. That's the truth, and it's ugly, but it's true." The honesty was painful and necessary. These weren't empty apologies or defensive justifications. This was genuine accountability. The crisis team saved my life, but they also did something else. They forced you to confront reality. They made you accountable. They didn't let you minimize or excuse or pretend. And as much as I resented that intervention at the time, I'm grateful for it now, because it meant I didn't have to keep drowning while everyone around me looked away. Dr. Rivera leaned forward. "What do you need from your family moving forward?" I'd thought about this a lot. "I need you to keep showing up, to keep asking questions even when the answers are uncomfortable, to not assume that because I seem okay, I am okay. And I need you to understand that I might never be the person you expected me to be, and that has to be enough." "It is enough," Dad said firmly. "You're enough, Alexa, exactly as you are." I'd waited years to hear those words. The changes weren't just happening in therapy. They were showing up in daily life. Mom started a support group for families dealing with mental illness, channeling her natural organizing skills into something meaningful. Dad cut back his hours at work and started having one-on-one breakfast with me every Sunday. Marcus asked genuine questions about my mental health and actually listened to the answers. But perhaps the most significant change was in me. I'd stopped waiting for permission to take up space. I quit the daily grind and found a new job at a local print shop that did custom design work. The owner, a woman named Rita, knew about my hospitalization — Riverside was a small town —
and hired me anyway. Everyone's got something they're dealing with, she'd said during the interview. I care about whether you can do the work, not about your medical history. The job was entry-level, but it got me back into design. I was creating again, even if it was just wedding invitations and business cards. It felt like watering a plant I'd thought was dead, watching tiny green shoots emerge. Jasmine and I rebuilt our friendship slowly. We established boundaries. I promised to be honest when I was struggling, and she promised not to take my withdrawal personally. Real friendship, it turned out, could withstand honesty.
4 months post-hospitalization, I did something radical. I started a blog about my experience. Not for attention or sympathy, but because Dr. Wallace suggested that sharing my story might help process it. I wrote about the depression, the suicide attempt, the treatment, the messy recovery. I wrote about family dynamics and the failure of invisibility and the power of intervention. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but people did. First dozens, then hundreds. Comments from others who'd felt invisible in their families. Messages from parents who recognized their own patterns of avoidance. Stories from people who'd survived suicide attempts and wanted me to know I wasn't alone. The shame I'd carried about being the girl who had a mental breakdown began to shift into something else. Not pride exactly, but a sense of purpose. My suffering hadn't been meaningless. It had taught me things about survival, about asking for help, about the importance of being seen. 6 months after that terrible Tuesday night when police showed up at my door, I sat in Dr. Wallace's office for what she called a progress evaluation. "Tell me where you are right now," she said. "I'm okay," I said, and meant it completely. I still have hard days. The depression hasn't disappeared. I don't think it ever will entirely. But I have tools now. I have support. I have a life that feels worth living. What's different from 6 months ago? I thought about that. Everything and nothing. The circumstances aren't that different. I'm still living at home, still figuring out my career, still dealing with family stuff. But I'm different. I know my worth isn't dependent on being invisible or perfect or easy. I know that asking for help isn't weakness, and I know that my family's failure to see me wasn't actually about me at all. That's significant insight, Dr. Wallace said with a smile. The crisis team accountability session, when Dr. Hammond made my parents face what was happening, that was the turning point. Not just for me, but for all of us. They couldn't unsee it once it was spoken out loud. They couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I used to think that night was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Having strangers in my room, my private pain exposed, my family's dysfunction laid bare. But now I see it differently. That intervention didn't just save my life. It gave me a life worth saving. It forced everyone to be accountable, including me, Dr. Wallace noted. And now? Now I'm building something new. Not the life I planned before, but maybe something better. Something real. That evening, I sat with my family in the living room, not for therapy, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. We watched a movie together, made popcorn, argued playfully about what to watch next. Marcus showed me a funny video. Mom fell asleep on Dad's shoulder. Normal family stuff. The kind I'd watched from the outside for so long. Except now, I wasn't outside anymore. I was here, present, seen. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Coffee tomorrow?" "Absolutely," I typed back. Later, alone in my attic room, which I'd finally cleaned, decorated with my design work, transformed from prison to sanctuary, I opened my journal. Dr. Wallace had encouraged me to track my progress, not just the struggles, but the victories too. I wrote, "Today, I realize I want to be here. Not just that I'm okay with being alive, but that I actively want to be here. I want to see what happens next. I want to keep building this life. I want to become the person I'm meant to be." I closed the journal and looked out my window at the oak trees lining Maple Grove Lane, the same view I'd stared at during my darkest days, when everything felt hopeless and impossible. The trees hadn't changed. The street hadn't changed. But I had. And that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.